The year is 1865. A steamboat named the Sultana is transporting thousands of Union soldiers up the Mississippi from a Confederate prisoner of war camp to freedom and families in the North. The floorboards are creaking, and the steamboat seems to be overloaded. Because it is. The steamboat is loaded roughly 5 times its maximum capacity. At around 2 in the morning, an explosion is heard on the Sultana. More than half of these men will never come home to their families. This becomes the worst maritime disaster in the history of the U.S. This is a case of greed and incompetence ending thousands of lives. This is the story of the Sultana disaster. The story starts in 1865 in Cairo, Illinois. The captain of the steamboat Sultana has just heard that the President Lincoln was shot and killed by John Wilkes Booth. The name of the captain is James Mason, and the ship he pilots is about 260 feet long and 40 feet wide, with at least 3 decks. Mr. Mason buys newspapers and heads down south to sell them, since the South no longer has reliable telegraph lines after the war. When he reaches Vicksburg, Mississippi, he is approached by the chief quartermaster at Vicksburg, Reuben Hatch. Reuben Hatch is a person who really should not have his job. He has almost been convicted of taking bribes and grafting twice, robbing the U.S. government of thousands of dollars. He has been saved from these charges by his brother, the Illinois Senator Uzziah Hatch. Uzziah is close with Lincoln, and Lincoln saved Hatch twice because of his brother. But also because of his brother, he gave Reuben Hatch his current job as quartermaster. And it is because of these choices that thousands will die. Back in 1865, Hatch is approaching the captain of the Sultana, James Mason. At this point, steamboats are being paid to take soldiers back north. The steamboats are paid by the person. Hatch offers Mason a deal. He will make sure that Mason gets all of the soldiers at Vicksburg in exchange for part of the money. Mason agrees to this deal. It is a few days later when the Sultana comes to pick up her cargo. It went down to New Orleans to pick up roughly 70 people, as well as some livestock. On its way back, one of its 4 boilers blew a crack. It needed a part to be replaced. That would have taken 2 to 3 days, and the Sultana would lose the load of Union soldiers. Mason told the mechanic simply to patch the boiler, which was only a 1-day repair, while they were in the Vicksburg harbor. When asked if he thought the ship was safe after that repair, the mechanic replied that he did not. The ship's repair finishes at Vicksburg. There are 1,960 Union soldiers that all get loaded on the Sultana. Hatch had originally suggested that the Sultana would get around 1,400 prisoners, but the numbers swelled. The ship's original legal carrying capacity of 376 people was exceeded by at least 5 times. At some points, the ship's floor had to be reinforced by heavy wooden beams. On April 24th, the Sultana left port and fought up the mighty Mississippi. The river was having one of its worst floods ever, and the ship had to work even harder than usual to get upstream, along with having 5 times the carrying capacity. After 2 days, the vessel landed in Arkansas. The ship then traveled to Memphis, where it picked up a load of coal, and where 200 lucky passengers got off, along with 120 tons of sugar. It left around midnight. And then 1 o'clock passed. And then 2 o'clock passed. And then its boiler exploded, leaving a split second later 2 more of them too. A huge burst of steam was sent upward, completely destroying the pilot house. The explosion flew some of the passengers into the water and caused the twin smokestacks to tip, leading to the top deck getting crushed. The wood the boat was made of caught fire and led to the entire ship being set ablaze. A pilotless 300-foot-long inferno of death with over 2,000 living, breathing passengers on it just 5 minutes earlier. Boats were able to come by and rescue some of the people, but death estimates range wildly, with the most recent numbers suggesting that at least 1,547 people died. But most sources conclude that it was over 1,800. For reference, 1,517 people are thought to have been killed in the Titanic disaster. This is the worst maritime disaster in United States history. There were people who were saved, luckily, and were transported up to Memphis, which had been converted by Union soldiers into a supply and recuperation center. So the survivors got great medical care for the time. And only 31 of the 760 recovered survivors perished while there. The reason the Sultana exploded is unknown, but I will walk you through the most likely cause from my research. What is believed to have happened is that the boiler exploded from the rocking of the boat. The rocking back and forth due to the vast overcrowding of the top deck led to the boiler getting hot spots which were weaker. The boiler also had increased pressure due to the flooding of the Mississippi and having to work harder to go upstream. These factors most likely combined, and since the boiler was already weakened from that previous faulty repair job, the boiler exploded and destroyed the Sultana. Another popular alternate theory involves a device that was shaped to look like a piece of coal, but instead was a metal capsule that held gunpowder, known as a coal torpedo. It was believed that this may have possibly been slipped onto the ship, which caused it to blow up. Now, this disaster is not widely known, which can be baffling with the tremendous loss of life. The worst U.S. maritime disaster before this was the Central America disaster, in which 425 people perished on that ship, roughly 1/4 of the estimated death toll of the Sultana, making it at that point in history 4 times worse than a U.S. maritime disaster before it. Now, the reason this disaster is believed to not be widely known is because Lincoln had just perished, which overshadowed the news story, and being right after the Civil War, where hundreds of thousands had died, the country really did not care about 1,000 more people. This is why you have probably never heard about this horrible tragedy. This is why you have not heard of the Sultana disaster.